some underlying issues from which all these experiences arise. That is in general both the solidarity economy experiences and many others. The fact of seeing that in the current situation in which we find ourselves, there are huge problems left open that we question. And so we discuss about issues of justice, about the equitable distribution of resources, about environment, but also in some way about our own way of life, what we do, and finally, the meaning of the things we do. These issues are huge and have been questioning us for a long time and generating answers. People are questioning what they can do to improve this situation, and in this way, many responses arise that act in the different fields, different places, actions, environments, situations in which we find ourselves embedded in our life. One strand of these responses has to do with our consumption, with what we consume, with how we consume, with what we consume, what products and services we use, and this comes precisely from this kind of reflection, that we are embedded in these mechanisms, we are part of this system of the model of production and consumption, and so on the one hand, we also have a little piece of responsibility within these systems, and on the other hand, along with this responsibility, also comes precisely our ability to change certain systems that we find unjust or that do not correspond to our values. But then, in reality, they are also supported by our actions, by our lifestyles, by our habits. So this reflection that began to be done more or less in the 90s in these terms, more related to consumption, in Italy at least, which in any case was born in the tradition, also of other experiences already present, such as fair trade or even others that place consumption as one of the areas of intervention. We find that among the different ways in which we can intervene to change the situation, there is also consumption, and critical consumption is brought to Italy in the 90s, in particular with the work of the New Development Model Center, and therefore the idea of getting information about what is behind the products and understand how to choose, what to prefer, and then who to reward with our consumption habits. These are now well-known topics, however they spread in Italy more or less in those years, in the 90s. The same guide to critical consumption from the New Development Model Center that does an analysis of the most popular products, those that are most easily found, then says, now keep looking, look for alternatives, for possibilities to build different channels. If the traditional channels in which we supply ourselves do not meet our needs, or otherwise do not meet our principles, our demand for health, respect for the environment, respect for working conditions, and it arises in this area, in this strand of critical consumption, of alternatives to be sought within consumption, as it was for fair trade, and also the perspective of critical consumption and of the solidarity purchasing groups, and therefore to try to satisfy within our purchases what we define as our principles, and to come up with criteria to meet those principles, then apply critical consumption precisely within our purchases, and organizing ourselves when we don't find solutions that are already available by organizing when we need to organize. In this strand of activity of thinking about responses that starts from our lifestyles within the situation in which we find ourselves is formalized in the 1994 in Fidenza, Italy, in the province of Parma, the first gas to give itself this name, formalizing an activity they had already been doing for a few years. We are precisely in those years, in the years when they start to spread critical consumption, and they got together in a very simple way too, rediscovering also many things that they were already doing and then saying, let's try to get together in this quest to organize ourselves to be able to source directly from producers so that we can meet what are our needs, our demands, the criteria that we saw earlier, and so it comes about in a very simple way within people who organize themselves in order to be able to apply critical consumption precisely to their expenses, and to be able to supply themselves with products from producers that they know directly and whose conditions in which they are made are known, and all the other criteria that we have seen, and then addressing these points within the group. This is the important particular aspect of buying groups. So coming together as a group and looking within the group, organizing themselves within the group, solutions to be able to source from products that meet these criteria, and then putting together each one a little piece of capacity, of time, of will, distributing tasks within the group, and in this way, getting where the individual cannot get, and thus dealing with products, orders, shipments, which would be too complicated for the individual to handle, and thus is born in this very concrete, very direct gas experience. It stems from this first group based on certain general criteria, which are preference towards small producers, preference towards local products, to make goods travel less, the preference in general toward organic or otherwise attention to environmental impacts, defense of the environment, and respect for working conditions. So people start organizing themselves following this principle, getting together and understanding in their situation what they need, how they can organize themselves, and how to put together the different needs of both the group and the producer by meeting with producers and finding with them the best conditions to build this chain. This experience has spread through word of mouth. This group started to have this experience. They liked it. They found benefits, told their friends about it. Their friends in the next town put together a similar thing. The first one was called gas, and it was just called gas. Then it was called gas Fidenza, to distinguish it from the second one, which was the Piacenza gas. And in this way, the experience was spread mainly through word of mouth, then it was also through the various news, stories, etc. But it spreads a lot in this very direct way, and each group then organizes itself and adjusts according to its needs, so the structure in the end can change a lot from one group to another. However, there are some common elements that characterize this gas experience, which are the fact that tasks are distributed within the group. Typically, for each supplier, there is a contact person. There is who takes care of the orders for that supplier, but these tasks precisely are distributed within the group. There are periodic orders that are organized within the group according to its needs, and then the group meets, do activities together, taste products, visit producers, inquires about its needs, gets information, puts information together, and so on. So there is this aspect of the group that is very useful to be able to address these points together and also grow and inform and educate themselves within the group. This way of purchasing involves some difficulties. Because there are a few things to be arranged, you have to organize some logistics, etc. But on the other hand, it brings with it many advantages and thus some improvements in the supply chain by which we procure the products we need. And so there is an important aspect related to sociality. The fact that problems are dealt with in the group. In the group, we help each other, we get to know each other, and so there is a different way also of approach consumption within the group. Among various aspects related to consumption, there are efficiencies, because buying as a group allows for efficiencies, so having local products allows for reductions in emissions and energy consumption or in general consumption of resources or pollution. There is a direct link that is created with the producers that has a double value. It is a collaboration that is established in the two senses and therefore can help producers find the best conditions for everyone. But it also gives an advantage to the consumers themselves who know better what is behind a product. They have a story that they know, and also they study together. They evaluate together the conditions that may be what can work best for each other, and also allows us to have great products, to have meaning, to make sense of many things we do, to have many stories to tell, to establish relationships, and together in the group learn and exchange information, and also to be involved in group activity. Because of this, there are these different advantages that have led. Then over time has a big spread of this experience, even though often at a very underground level. So it is also difficult to actually then understand what is behind it, how many people are involved. The fact now is that purchasing through gas has become one of the modes by which people buy products. There is the supermarket, there is the store, there is the market, and there are the gas. When statistics are made, a portion of consumers say they have purchased in the last month through a gas solidarity purchasing groups. What you see here is, at first we set out to counting groups. They were also quite active in making themselves known, so it was also easier to count them. And this is the growth curve in the early years until 2014, then more or less the situation of active gas that we were able to identify that were reported has remained constant. However, if you do surveys, and here is the latest survey which was done by an observatory through a statistical survey, so with the sample interviews compared to the population and so on, the people who are interviewed in 12% of the cases say that in the last month they have purchased through a solidarity buying group. This means that the practice is widespread, even though precisely at this level, very informal and unstructured. However, it has become one of the ways of buying in this form, also very underground. But the thing that most distinguishes perhaps GIS from other supply chains, other channels that perhaps also carry products that have similar characteristics, is that of the direct contact with the producers that allows you to know better what is behind it. But to establish a relationship of trust with the producer and therefore also be able to find the best conditions, be able to have mutual support, but above all to have a lot of information, stories, tales behind the products. If you go to eat at a typical gas consumer, if you ask a question about some food entity ingredient, he will start a half-hour description about the relationship that there was with that producer, about all the things that were seen together. So this also gives a contribution to what are the taste of the things we do, the meaning of the things we do, what's behind the various products. I put some more information here, a little bit of general information, just to give some hints about some general aspects that, however, you will cover in the various chapters of this course, but to say some aspects that characterize this gas experience. We were saying before that the way the group organizes itself can change a lot from one group to another. There are small groups, there are large groups, groups of 10 people, groups of 100 families. And then also the organization can change a lot from one group to another within these common principles. And also the form from the formal point of view can change. Most groups are informal. They do not have a defined formal structure. They are a group of people who come together and decides to buy together. This is allowed and is a way of buying together. Some groups formalize with an association, so they have a reference association, and there is a part. Usually those who are either bigger or who want to have other activities as well, who want to have a particular visibility in their area and have relationships with institutions or other entities. Furthermore, some groups rely on another organizations that takes care of certain aspects depending on the various cases of how one can organize. There are some common characteristics that also bring a transformation within the people who participate in the group. It has been seen that in the group then takes place what is learning among peers because there is a very horizontal structure. It is also easier to exchange information and practices within the group, and therefore the group learns together because there is an environment where people are also more willing to exchange information, to welcome new ones, and bring their own. And so the group also has this function of education, of self-education, which is best done in such an environment. And so there are these peer learning mechanisms, and also having a very informal network also allows people to be involved in different aspects that maybe on stronger themes would not be involved. However, also starting precisely from very concrete needs, from getting together with a fairly clear common goal and also a certain usefulness allows these groups to spread even in very different environments. There are groups in very many kinds of environments, and therefore also to bring messages of the information to the various environments through just this exchange that takes place within the group. And the group then organizes on its own. So each group has a quite different structure precisely because it adjusts according to the needs of the group itself. The GAS have been also recognized legally, even officially in 2008. They were defined, to be precise, a group of people who buy together and have nothing to do with commercial activities. They are two profoundly different things. The GAS is not a group that buys and resells, it is a group that buys together. GAS are consumers, and therefore to be that way there must be certain rules that are respected. In particular, everyone pays their part. There are no markups, but once the activity is configured in this way, then it is not a pass-through, it is not a brokerage, it is not a commercial activity, but is precisely simply people buying together. So this also clarified then how this can be handled from a fiscal point of view, that is, if these rules are maintained, so basically there are no markups, and then the expenses that are incurred to purchase products are divided among the participants in the group according to their share. This is a non-commercial activity and therefore not subject to VAT in the case of associations, etc. They are people who get together with a common purpose also precisely in the case of associations. And that's kind of how they came into being, how they have developed with those characteristics. And with what principles. Of course, then, appetite comes with eating, in the sense that you start to stock up on certain products, you find that it works, and you feel like extending the basket to more complex products, and even to more complex supply chains. And from this perspective, more complex supply chains have arisen, and in order to be organized, they need different subjects. Therefore, by bringing together several subjects, local networks of GAS were born. It often happens that different GASes in the same territory get together and build a network to deal at a network level, the things that cannot be done at the individual GAS level, or that is better organized at the network level. We in Turin, for example, have GAS Turin, which is an association. It is a network of GAS, and also the core of the Solidarity Economy District. And there are the typical regular purchases that are made by individual GAS. Each GAS organizes on its own, but on some things, on some aspects, such as relations with local authorities, some aspects of distribution, some types of orders, for example, oranges or other big orders, are managed together by the network of GIAS at the city level, involving all the GIAS in the city, because it is better managed at that level there. So often GIAS networks have emerged that perform certain functions that are better managed at the network level and not at the individual group level, and then they are one of the entities active in building the networks. And the Solidarity Economy Districts represent one of the links in the chain to close the circuits within the networks of the territory, both at the local and district level, and then at the broader levels. And therefore they are also among the promoters then, together with other actors of the solidarity economy, of what are the networks of the solidarity economy. And this goes precisely in the perspective of the revolution of networks that has then developed in Italy subsequently, but also thanks precisely to the contribution of the GAS, of their links that they were building with producers together with other actors, and therefore the idea precisely of building circuits, of closing these circuits as much as possible within the main network. In this way, the network can be strengthened through these same flows by putting consumers together, so GAS, who produces, who puts services, who brings information, who brings logistics, trying to build these circuits. This goes in the perspective of getting together, also addressing bigger issues that cannot be handled at the level of the individual group. And we also have different experiences on this. There are both more complex supply chains also also in the field of textiles. Some other experiences we have are experiences in the energy field, in particular coordinated by Coenergia, which is an association that brings together various districts and gases on some issues, on some complex supply chains, and then we have other issues, for example, those of insurance that are always constructed in this way. So they refer to issues or supply chains that cannot be addressed by a single group but can be addressed together by putting various pieces together, various gas and various other actors to build such supply chains, and this is also the perspective or the support that the gas can give, that is, to participate and build together these circuits that therefore have an even stronger value in the transformation of the economy towards the criteria and towards the direction that are the ones that we are interested in, that therefore can be carried out starting from a single purchase, but gradually extending this influence into larger and larger circuits and over longer and longer supply chains. Here you have some reference. There are some books that have been written on the subject. Then there are also many others in general on critical consumption, and this was my introduction. I stop for now, and I am available for any questions you have now, and also later on by email, or if there are other things that I can be helpful on.